there's a bunch of issues that I want to talk to you about, and I know that our viewers will love to hear your perspective on. But the first thing that I just wanted to talk about is how COVID's been in Israel, because it seemed like Israel was one of maybe possibly the first country, certainly one of the first to lock down, and then one of the first, if not the first, to distribute en masse the vaccine. Has all the hard work paid off?
So I would say yes. I think we have been able to welcome back at least groups to Israel, where it was a lot easier to kind of control them being tested and making sure that before, as a group, they go out into Israel, they can quarantine until they get their test results. So I think the vaccination program, the rollout was very effective, allowed us to open up a lot sooner than I think a lot of other countries, and just open up internally too, forget just to tourists, but just to be able to have Israelis go back and re-stimulate the economy. So it was very effective. We're being challenged right now, just like most other countries out there are being challenged with the new Delta variant, which, I mean, I'm not a scientist and I don't want to get into it, but there is an understanding that, the more people who are vaccinated, the less the variants will evolve. But when there's a big chunk that are vaccinated and a big chunk that aren't vaccinated, new variants are going to emerge. And that's what we're really seeing with Delta. And so, I'm not here to put on a campaign for vaccinations, but we do see that vaccinations have reduced the amount of hospitalizations. And so as much as we are going into another wave and we are increasing restrictions, they announced just next week in August 8th, and then August 10th, new restrictions are going to kick in terms of people returning from specific countries will actually need to go back into quarantine for a week or two. And so we are trying to get a hold of the Delta variant, but overall, we're still open. We still are inviting groups in. I was able to speak to over 1,300 students visiting Israel just in the month of July. And I don't think many other countries can say the same, where they've been able to do that and still maintain that low infection rate. And we're still in that low infection rate, but we are rising. And so the government is trying to really put the screws to the people to get back to wearing masks, socially distancing, less of the hugging, less of the kissing, which is hard, of course, because we kind of jumped right back into what many of us would have described as pretty normal life. And so we're back to, remembering to put on masks and starting to socially distance again and, continue to wash our hands and all those things that we were told to do back in the beginning. But hopefully people will comply. And with compliance, we do see that infection rates drop. So hopefully we'll get there. There is the conversation happening in the background in Israel on whether or not when the holidays hit throughout the month of September, if we will be locking down and preventing people from major gatherings, family gatherings, meals, people being able to go to synagogue and pray in large crowds. And so there is a conversation in the background happening about what is going to happen over the next month. And things are really up in the air right now. But I still think the vaccine rollout and where we've been able to get to at this point has been really successful. We are seeing the economy re-stimulated. We are seeing many people who are out of work back to work. We're not fully there yet, but hopefully we'll get Delta under control and we'll be, back heading in the right direction.
And what's the situation for people wanting to travel to Israel? And do we know whether things are going to change, especially around the holidays coming up? And
so we've kept pushing it off, right? So we heard July 1st, individual tourists were going to be allowed in. Who's allowed in right now? Let's start there. We've got groups, organized groups are still allowed in, and tourists who have a direct relative in Israel. So a child, a parent, grandparents, not grandparents. So child, parent, sibling, you can come into the country, but you have to get special approval, and that's a bureaucratic process. So moving forward, we see that, they were pushing off the date for tourists to come into August. Now they've pushed it off and they haven't really given us a date in which tourists will be able to enter. I'm not going to try to predict the future, but in my opinion, I don't think that tourists are going to be able to come into the country until after the holidays. I think we are going to try to limit the amount of people coming into the country. And what we're also trying to do is limit the amount of Israeli travel that's happening, because really, I think what we acknowledged was the Delta variant was really brought back by Israelis who had traveled and came home and didn't quarantine properly. And therefore we saw the variant start to spread. So we're going to stay pretty locked down in terms of our borders. And I think they're adding more restrictions to incoming travelers, especially tourists. And I don't see that opening up anytime in the next month.
Well, we're all waiting with bated breath for Israel to develop its cure for every single COVID variant. um,
Yeah.
yeah, good luck.